Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry, to Gar-Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Jumps to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! There's Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Whammo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the Phoenix Suns and the NBA. My name is Max McCauley, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host. His name is David Nash. David, how's it going, man?
It's going good, Max. It's good to be back, and it's good to be recording after a winning week. What was the best moment of the week from you, Max?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I missed the Boston game live, which I think was probably the most fun win of the week.
Yep.
Although the New York, maybe I'm overlooking New York. The absolutely pounding, even though it's the New York Knicks, absolutely pounding somebody in their own arena was nice, David.
It was a fun week overall, but yeah, the Boston game was probably the highlight for me. But should we move straight to the recap to talk about that fun week, Max?
Yeah, I'll just real quickly point out what we're going to do on the podcast today. We are going to go through our leaderboard, of course, before we go into sort of like a more season-long leaderboard kind of, David. We're going to give our ratings 1 through 10 on kind of where every player in the roster's been versus our expectations. And I don't know about you, David, but going through the exercise was kind of weird for me because it's hard to rate some of these guys. They trending in weird directions.
They are. They're kind of all up and down. So I kind of ended up giving, some of them a middle grade to kind of even that out. But we'll get into that a little bit later, and hopefully the listeners will enjoy it and agree and maybe disagree with some of our grades, Max.
I have no doubt there will be some disagreement with some of our grades. And then we're going to touch a little bit on the West playoff races we were wont to do lately. At the end, before we get to the recap, though, David, I just want to point out that my buddy Justin, he's an Aussie Rules football player in Arizona, David.
Love it.
A sport that I know is near and dear to your heart. Plays for a team called the Arizona Hawks. They're doing a promotion with our beloved Phoenix Suns. They're offering discounted tickets to the game on Saturday, February 8th against the Denver Nuggets. That's the 2 seed in the Western Conference on a Saturday night. You can check it out at groups.suns.com/events/Arizona Hawks. And David, apparently they're also going to demonstrate Aussie Rules football on the court.
Oh, no. I can't wait for all the talk on Twitter about this.
Yeah, it should be interesting. But go check it out. Support Justin. He's a cool guy. But all right, David, how about the recap?
Well, I think I've got myself another team, the Hawks. That's who I follow here in our Pro League. So happy to jump on the Arizona Hawks, and sounds like a great thing for people to get involved in. But this week, or overall, Max, I should say, the Phoenix Suns are 18-24 after 42 games in the NBA. So as you said, we're past the halfway point now, and a good chance to check in with the players and how the team's going overall. But this week in particular, 4 games, we went 3-1. Ricky Rubio had a baby. Congrats to Ricard. And obviously Kelly's concussion was the other news of the week, but it sounds like he's going to be back for the Spurs game tonight. We're recording just before that one on your Monday, I believe, Max. But we had the win against Charlotte 100-92, where Kelly had 25. The loss to Atlanta, which was very disappointing, 110-123. Book went off for 39. The win against the Knicks, as you said, a blowout. Haven't had one of those for a while, 121-98. Booker top scored again with 29. And then the win at Boston, which I'm sure is going to come up quite a lot throughout this episode now that you've rewatched that one as well, Max. 123-119. They certainly made us sweat towards the end, although I'm sure knowing the result, you were able to enjoy that ending a little bit more, Max. But
David, I was so happy that I watched that game not live.
I was an absolute wreck in the ups and downs of that. I think with about 12 with 12-point lead with, I don't know, however long it was left, a minute and a half or something, I thought it was done. And then all of a sudden, Book gives up a clear path and a few other costly mistakes. But Book did almost have his first triple-double of his career, 39, 10, and 9. Ayton had 26 and 15. Mikal, breakout game, 26, 3, 2, and 2 with 6 threes. And I should also mention Ayton's 11 free throw attempts there as well, Max. To round it out, third in the division, 3 games above the Kings and an 11.5 back from the Clippers. 10th in the conference, 1 game ahead of Portland, just behind the Spurs, and 2 games out of 8th Memphis, who are currently sitting there, and 18th in the NBA, Max.
Wow. So that's a lot better than they've been recently, David. Although 18 still sounds kind of sad to me.
It does. It's below average, which isn't great, but we're trending upwards, Max.
I'm always happy with the trend upwards. How about we go to the leaderboard now, David? Do you want to go ahead and give us a quick overview of like what the leaderboard looks like in general before we get into this week?
Can do. The leaderboard, Booker's about to pass 1,000 votes, so he is way out in front at the moment. Kelly, Ricky, and Aaron Baines are 2nd, 3rd, and 4th at the moment. DeAndre Ayton only has 45 votes, but I'm guessing he is going to change very quickly from 11th on the leaderboard in the coming weeks if he keeps playing the way he did this week, Max, and I think he's about to make that run. A few listeners have already sent their Week 12 votes as well, which is great for me and great for us and great to see everyone on board. But yeah, just looking at that, I think Ayton is ready for a big run here. But Week 12, we're calling it for anyone who hasn't sent their votes in just yet, and it's the games I just recapped: Charlotte, Atlanta, the Knicks, and Boston. Max, how about you start? I'm interested to know whether you differ from me with your 5 votes here, because I think it was tempting to go the other way than what I have.
I wasn't tempted at all to stray from Devin Booker, to be honest. He's just so freaking ridiculous right now.
Yeah.
Even in the game that we lost, the Atlanta game, he was incredible. The Charlotte game, he wasn't very good in, but the other ones he was all great in. And obviously against Boston, he was. That was. I mean, I say this a lot about Booker because I think it's true a lot. That might have been my favorite all-around game from him ever in the Boston game. He was awesome in the game. I know he committed that horrible clear path foul towards the end, but he also, I mean, the ice in his veins on those free throws at the end, David. He even made the one where the ref intervened. He was so calm on those shots. I don't know if there's a son since Steve Nash that I've trusted more at the free throw line with the game on the line.
Yeah, I mean, I said I was nervous throughout. I wasn't really nervous about those free throws because he just had that steely look in his eye. And, he's a 92% free throw shooter this year. So if you want anyone going for those clutch free throws, it's definitely Devin Booker. But, they tried to ice him. As you said, they, ran in front of his first one. They, had a huge break in play, which would really rattle some guys. But he just knocked those ones down. 29.8 points for the 4 games, 50, 27, and 91 from the free throw line, 6.3 boards, 6.3 assists. I really wanted to go Ayton. As I said, I couldn't do it, just like you, Max. I don't think the case was there for him. I'm sure some of our listeners will, because we're all voting, a little bit differently here. And I'm sure a lot of people would have been excited by Ayton's week and wanted to give him the 5 votes. But Book plus 15.3 team high for the week this week, and I had to give him the 5 votes, Max.
Yeah, Ayton would be the fun vote because it's just so nice to see him starting to get to where we need him to be, aggressiveness-wise. And, I mean, I won't, bear the lead here. He's my 4-star player for sure. Mm-hmm. Against New York, that was probably my favorite game of his career. Boston, not far behind that. There were some, you pointed this out on Twitter, and you were very right that there were some lapses from him, particularly towards the end of the game. But just overall, the way he's attacking the game on both ends is exciting. I think he's actually maybe one of our best 5 defenders now, which is amazing. He might be one of our best 3 defenders, honestly.
I was going to say I'd put him 3, maybe even top 2 with Mikal at the moment, just the way he's been playing. There's a lot of defensive metrics getting thrown around on Twitter and things like that, which are all very positive, don't get me wrong, but just need to see a larger sample size, I guess, before we start throwing him in those conversations. But as of right now, based on what we've seen, I think top 3 clearly.
Yeah, his impact on defense is clearly top 3. I don't know if I'd say he's top 3 in terms of being good at defense yet. You know what I mean? Yeah. But definitely impact wise, he's just a freakish mover, and with that size, that wingspan, and you move that way, it's hard not to be a good defender unless you're totally lost like he was last year. So the fact that he's just even not lost, it's really it's showing returns quickly. The rebounding, I don't care about 10 rebounds. I do start to care when it's 16 plus rebounds. That starts to matter more. Yeah, it means you're really impacting the game on both ends. I've just been really happy with what I've seen from him, David.
Especially if it's 4.3 offensive boards, which is what he average this week, and he's hovering around 4 for the season, which is the really important one. I highlighted on Twitter, I'm with you, Max. Defensive rebounds are pretty overrated, but down the stretch there, he had a big one against 2 guys, one of them being Cantor. Rubio got knocked to the floor. It was just a really key defensive stop that they needed to finish, and he battled for it. Cantor's a pretty good offensive rebounder himself, so those ones are really important. But yeah, he was my 4 votes too. He was next best, team high at 13 for the week, 22.5 points, 13.8 rebounds, 1.3 assists, and 1.8 blocks, which is quite important as well. That seems to be trending, looks like to be the word of this podcast, but definitely trending in the right direction, Max.
You know what stat I would love to see? I bet some teams have this. It would be a stat that's basically like contested rebounds, either caused by your team if you box out and help get one, or just gotten. Yep. That would be a really good stat, because I think defensive rebounding numbers could be inflated on things like free throws, stuff like that. Yep. But I felt like some of Ayton's rebounds were more more productive this week than they have in the past.
He's just reaching over guys and grabbing rebounds, which is just great to see. But yeah, you're about to go to it, which I'm very intrigued by. I struggled with 3 votes this week, Max. So lead us off and let me know what you've got.
I'm guessing I know who you were struggling between. I actually wasn't struggling. I actually struggled between 4 and 3, a little more than I did between 3 and 2. I think Mikal Bridges just deserves the spot outright.
Yeah,
he deserved to be higher a lot on our list, I think, because every single person who watches basketball is subject to the offense bias over defense, because defense is just quieter. But Mikal Bridges finally brought in an offense this week, and the defense is just stellar as always, and he's a very deserving 3-star player.
I totally agree with you, Max. 14.5 points, shot 72% from the field this week, and 57%, I believe, from 3, thanks to that big game. I think went 6 of 8 against the Boston Celtics. But, as always with Mikal, also added in 3.3 boards, 2 assists, 1.5 steals, and almost 1 block for the week as well. The defense is his calling card, and he keeps bringing it night after night. Good to see him step up. We've had a lot of injuries in that starting lineup where guys had to go in and spot fill, and they've really done nothing. And, this was probably the first time this season where a guy went into the starting lineup and really stepped up to the occasion. We've got a note that it looked like Boston were, essentially scouting they were happy to leave him wide open, because they probably knew what we've been talking about quite a lot on the podcast, that he's, a little reluctant to shoot, but maybe he saw that coming, and, he was firing him off. He got a bit of confidence, and it's amazing what that can do for the ball to start go through the net. So yeah, he played all 4, which is another reason why I easily slotted him in for 3 votes this week, Max.
Yeah, and I think the confidence point is such a huge one. Like, the Mikal Bridges of 2 weeks ago is not taking that ball into the lane and hitting that shot to give us the 5-point lead, the biggest shot of the game. Like, that's just not going to happen. But he has the ability to do it. I think that's, honestly, Ayton's the most important thing on this team, obviously, him improving, but Mikal's easily second, right? I mean, if we can finally get a 3-and-D player who's actually a 3-and-D player on our team, that would go a long way towards helping this team succeed.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about, obviously, the 2 of them a little bit later, but I think they're the 2 guys. I know a lot of fans are looking at trades and bigger trades to take this team forward, but I would go with Mikal and Ayton as the 2 guys that can, make a leap individually and really make a leap for the team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're the key. But let's get to the 2-star player. I'm interested to hear who you have here, because you said it was close for you. I thought this guy was amazing. I'm guessing this might be the same guy you had, because I saw that you were in on him as well. Dario Saric, David.
Ooh, I really struggled with this one, but I went with Rubio. So give us your Dario, because I do have him, not to give it away, but I've got him in my last vote here. So give us the case for Dario for 2 votes this week, Max.
Yeah, I have Rubio as my 1-star, so I thought he was also deserving on the list. Rubio just missed the game in Atlanta, was the big reason why I put Saric over him. Just doing the yeoman's work, David. I was complaining to somebody the other day in person about how the Suns just don't have a lot of guys who do the glue guy stuff, They have a lot of guys who are more of the star-type players, whether or not they're actually stars or not. That's just kind of their skill sets. But Dario's really been bringing that lately, especially this week. I thought in Boston he was huge, hit some big shots, got some tough rebounds. Same in the New York game. I thought he was very, very good. I think that was the game you pointed out how well he was playing. He does a lot of things that get overlooked.
Yeah, his third quarter for the Knicks, and I think his fourth quarter against Boston, he just manages to go on these little runs where he has, a couple of buckets, a couple of assists, and some good defense as well. So, I'll jump to it. You look at his numbers for the week, 8, 6, and 3. It just doesn't jump off the page. But that's the thing with Dario, unless you're watching his minutes and how he goes. And, we've talked about this quite a lot on the pod is like, when they go on those runs, who's on the court? And Dario seems to always be one of the guys that are sparking some of these things. So, very much deserving of your 2 votes and my 1 vote. I threw Rubio in for the 2 votes, Max. Played the 3 games for the week, and we won all 3. He was next best behind Booker and Ayton from a team high perspective net rating for the week. Shot pretty well, which, when Rubio shoots well for the week, we tend to win, Max, but 10.3 assists on the week as well. And he's just, diming up a treat this season. We'll get to his individual play for the season a little bit later, but I felt bad leaving Kelly out because it was the start of the week, but we've probably already forgotten how amazing he was in the Charlotte game. His line in that game was just incredible from a wing player. So feel a little bit bad, but on such a good week where you miss a couple of games, it's hard to sneak you into the votes, Max.
Yeah, there were some weeks where he probably would have gotten the board from that game alone. But the Atlanta game, he was pretty poor, and then obviously, as you alluded to, he missed the other couple with a concussion. I'm glad you brought him up though, and maybe we'll just go ahead and go to him now real quick. What do you think about the fact that the Suns have looked maybe the best they've looked in a long time without him on the floor?
It's a really interesting point. I think he's a little bit of a ball stopper. At times, I think he can kind of go into Kelly mode occasionally. I think that Atlanta game where, we kind of needed it. And, in hindsight, we know that he was essentially concussed for the last half of that game now. But, Booker and Kelly, just when there was no offense going, they kind of went to the mode of just attacking themselves and forgetting their teammates. One thing I've really struggled is, we've noted on the pod, there's been a few comments from Monty and Rubio and I think even Devin Booker about guys, or maybe Baines, I think, guys not staying to the system, playing a little bit selfish, them forgetting who they are. And I've just, from who those comments have gone from, they can't be talking about Devin Booker because he's, can do what he wants. He's got a green light. I've always, struggled with who might it be that they're talking about. And I actually always come back to Kelly as the guy that potentially their guys are talking about. So I think it is worth noting that, they've had this success recently. We've talked about a lot. We did a lot in the offseason when we tried to make the case for Mikal starting. I think, we very much went back on that at the start of the season because the difference between Oubre and Bridges was just night and day. You had to start Kelly Oubre. But, there are things about Mikal, his defense, the fact that he doesn't really need the ball. He gets a lot of his stuff off cuts, hopefully in the future just shooting wide open threes, whereas Kelly's a little bit more ball dominant, and particularly with Ayton back in the lineup, they may struggle with that chemistry a little bit, which will be really interesting to see probably tonight against the Spurs, Max.
I think we've both always thought that Kelly long term makes more sense as a bench leader kind of guy.
Yeah.
It's kind of the game he has. First of all, he's a little inconsistent. So maybe we'll just go to him now. So we're going to do our scorecard as I alluded to earlier. 1 through 10 based on our preseason expectations. So if a player is rated to 5, that means it's exactly the same as we thought he would be going into the season. A 1 would be much worse, 10 much, much better. So we'll go ahead and start on Kelly since we're talking about him now. I have him as a 7. The thing about him, the reason why I think he's a bench guy long term is he's just inconsistent. Guys who are starters, you want them to bring kind of the same level of thing every single night. And obviously, not everyone's going to bring the same level of thing every single night, but you want it to be somewhat consistent. Kelly's a little wild all over the place on what he brings. On his good nights, he is great. He can be our best player on certain nights. And then other times he's just, again, like the Atlanta game, I think he went 4 for 16 and he's just not there. And he's kind of hurting you out there. And you kind of want that guy to be on your bench more than your starting lineup. So if he's not on a particular night, you're not as reliant on him. And also, you kind of want, we've made this point a million times over the offseason, you want the guys around your big stars, Booker and Ayton being our big stars, to be glue guy type players. And that's why Mikal Bridges has always been the best fit with them because of what you mentioned. Doesn't need the ball in his hands, plays defense. If we keep seeing the Mikal we saw from Boston, the Boston game, I think it's going to be a move they need to make sooner rather than later to inject him in the starting lineup.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to ask you a question about the starting lineup going forward. Again, I don't think there's any question for the first 42 games of this year that Kelly Oubre should be the starter at small forward. I'm sure some listeners are yelling while listening that, maybe we can play them both and not play Dario.
Yeah.
It could work. I'm still a guy that probably wants to start Dario, and if it's a certain lineup, you can certainly end with Mikhail and Kelly, which Monty has been doing quite a lot, which I love. It's fine to end with a different lineup to what you start the game with. I scored him an 8 just to get it out there. He's got career highs in field goal, 3-point, free throw attempts, rebounds, assists, steals, points, PER, and true shooting percentage. So, when we signed him relative to expectation of him getting paid and coming back and wanting to still see improvement from him, he's probably done, everything that we could have asked for, Max. I'm not sure if there's anything that you would allude to that you wanted out of Kelly for this year that he's not doing, other than probably what you just did, which is the consistency, Max.
Yeah, I would like to see a little more consistently defense from him.
Yep.
Still the lapses are there, and that may just always be something with him. But I mean, I gave him a 7 as we'll go through on this. I didn't give anybody higher than an 8, so very high on Kelly, obviously.
Yep.
He's been really, really good this season. He's improved some of the flaws in his decision making, which plagued him before. I mean, there's still some that are there, but I think it's smoothed out a lot compared to last season.
Yep.
And probably a lot compared to before that even. The advanced numbers still don't love him, David. I'm not 100% sure why that is. I think maybe some of the decision-making stuff in the lapses, but overall, I mean, I think you have to be happy with him. He's definitely earned his contract, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, exactly. And, probably just to throw in this tidbit, I'll throw it back to you because you're the one who worked it out. But, there's been a little bit of talk about extending Kelly before the contract comes up, which, Max, cannot happen. And I will let you tell the listeners why.
Yeah, his contract's not long enough. It has to be at least 3 years, I believe. Is that right, David? I know
Yes.
2 years cannot be extended, so
Yeah.
they're going to have to wait. I'm not overly concerned about it because if he keeps earning this contract, then I think the Suns are going to pay him. And by all accounts, he loves being here. I mean, he's like the captain of our Valley Boys, happy train when everything's going
Yep.
well. So I don't really expect him to be gone if he's playing well. I still think it's nice to have him on this 2-year thing because you want to see where he is before you give him his next contract. I think, but. We'll see.
I think he still has all-star potential. I noted during the week, him at his peak, which you could say about a lot of guys, him at his peak is probably an all-star if he does that 82 games of the season. Like you look at his season numbers against, someone like Jason Tatum, who's in the conversation for the all-star, and they're not very, too far apart, I should say. Tatum's obviously younger, and don't get me wrong, I'm taking Tatum, 10 times out of 10 over Kelly Oubre. But, just to jump on the back of your point, if he does bring consistency to his game and we don't get those duds every now and then, particularly it seems to be when the Suns lose, he doesn't step up. There is a chance that he's still, got the potential to be an all-star type player. And that's probably where the convo starts and finishes in terms of whether he's a starter long-term, because he's almost in the window of becoming our next TJ Warren, where we feel like he should be a 6-man rather than a starter on this team. And if Mikhail keeps playing the way that he did against Boston, I think the conversation's going to get really, really tough. But I've loved his defense, a little bit more passing. As you said, he's gotten a little bit better there. But I've just loved his overall attack. There's certain games where they just need a guy to attack the rim, and he's just been relentless this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's definitely the best thing about him, his engine. He's always attacking, and when the Suns are going through slumps, he's like the one guy who often won't be slumping with them. So guys like that are important. Let's move on, though, to how about Devin Booker, David? You want to talk about the best player on the team?
I would love to talk about the best player on the team. I'm going to just throw it out there. You've given away that you haven't given more than an 8. We're all going to differ, guys, on how we vote this, but relative to expectations, I'm giving Devin Booker a 10. I just don't. What more can you say about him? But I'll let you give your score, and then I'll throw a question your way to hopefully frame the discussion, Max.
Sure, I gave him an 8. the highest score I've given anybody, tie with somebody else we're going to get to soon. It's really just a reflection of how high my expectations are for him, David.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a chance that there was a chance he would have averaged 30 points a game this season on similar efficiency to this. So that would be a 10 for me, I guess. Please don't let that just be any sort of indictment on him. He's an obvious all-star. In fact, if he was playing the way he's been playing lately, the past 10 games-ish, it'd probably be a 9 or a 10 because he's been so free. Like that Boston game was a true superstar performance, David. Some of the crap he was doing as a playmaker, and he has one pass. Do you remember the one to check Diallo come in from the other side? That was just an incredible freaking pass. That was like Luka Doncic, Damian Lillard stuff.
And probably should point out, it was on the money for Diallo to actually, jump and dunk that as an alley-oop, but I think he was just as surprised at the pass coming and how wide open he was. He kind of took the pass, took a couple of seconds to realize what was going on and then went up and laid it in. But it would have been even more of a highlight if he managed to see the pass coming and just jump up and alley-oop it in.
It was such a gorgeous pass, man. That's the kind of stuff, if he can get to the point where he's making that kind of pass consistently and he shores up his three-point shooting, especially off the dribble, that's how you become James Harden, folks. That's what you got to do, and that's why it's so encouraging. But, what's your question about him?
Yeah, I mean, I've just given him a 10, so I feel I can do this, and it hopefully not be too counterintuitive to me giving him a 10 for my overall expectations. But should we talk about improvements? Maybe, nitpick at Devin Booker a little bit on the season so far, Max.
Yeah, well, so I'd say that the two areas would be the three-point shooting, which, I mean, it's kind of hard to just yell at him and be mad at him for that because his shots aren't going in. There are a lot of close misses with him from three. So I think it'll probably regress a little higher towards the mean, but that's probably one thing. And the other thing, and this is the biggest one by far, David, it's some of the decision-making, whether it results in turnovers or just bad ticky-tack fouls. The guy's got to stop using his arm to push off on offense so much. It's getting called all the time. I think in the Knicks game in particular, I think I even tweeted about his decision-making in that game was not very good. Picking up some really bad fouls, just doing some dumb stuff that he's such a smart player in so many other ways. His feel for the game is so good. You'd love to see him cut some of that crap out.
Yeah, he drove Monty absolutely nuts the last two games. New York, he was in foul trouble and, gave away a couple more dumb fouls. And if you were watching Monty, he was just throwing his hands up in disgust and then, not dragging him for the fouls, but he had to because he was in foul trouble yet again. So that drove him nuts. And the clear path in the Boston game is just, a guy like Devin Booker, he is still young, but he's just got to know better and know the game situation a little bit better than that. But the bad passes still, we just upped his passing, talked about how amazing it is, but, still 3.8 turnovers. Probably the last couple of years now, the assist to turnover ratio has been pretty much identical. You'd like to see either the assists go right up and, we could talk about potential assists and things like that, which we have on the pod and how he's up there in the NBA for his teammates not making shots and giving him more assists. But I'd just love to see either one go up or one go down a little bit more, Max.
Yeah, totally. I think you're the one who brought up the tweet from the person who was talking about how Devin Booker has the best assist passes in the league and also some of the worst.
Yes.
And I think it's absolutely correct. And we both agreed last week that that's generally a good thing for a young player because at least he can make those really good passes. And you hope that over time, especially the fact that Devin Booker hasn't played in a lot of high leverage situations in his career, I feel like as the games keep being more and more important, he'll learn more how to control himself and how to not make the dumb fouls and not make the dumb passes. That's probably, when you're a 19-win team throughout a season, it's just the stakes aren't very high.
Yeah,
when you're doing stuff like that. So hopefully that's kind of what gets him there. But yeah, I mean we're nitpicking here. Overall, it's just incredible. My favorite Devin Booker stat right now is his layup percentage. David is 0 to 3 feet field goal percentage, which is 75% right now, which is just that's Giannis Antetokounmpo stuff, dude. It doesn't even make sense, David.
He just finishes so well. He's got all the tricks. It wasn't a layup, but the double clutch that he had against Boston on the baseline, almost perfect defense. That's just soul-destroying stuff as a defender. You play perfect defense and he just hangs a little bit longer than you and hits it. And for anyone who saw that or wants to go back and watch it, just watch the bench. And I think it's Javon Carter and Tyler Johnson who put their hands on their head and just can't believe what they've seen, which was most of us watching that one. But what would you score his defense out of 10 relative to expectations for the season, Max? Just curious.
It's a good question. It's one of those things that's gone up and down throughout the season, and that's going to be a theme as we go through this going on. But I think relative to expectations, maybe like a 6 or a 7.
Yep.
He's actually showing some effort at that end sometimes. He had a really nice steal in the Boston game, I think against Hayward.
Yes.
Which is you'd like to see from him. But overall, he's still not a good defender, so it's hard to go higher than that.
Yeah, just a bit more engaged on that end. Still has his slip-ups and gets beat backdoor a little bit, but he, has had more moments this year. So again, hopefully that keeps trending in the right direction, Max.
You'd really like to see his steals go up, right? Because even bad defenders can get steals if they're on the board a lot.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't really get them. I'm not sure if that's because of the wingspan or just not really paying attention to it, but that's something I'd like to see him improve. Anything else on Devin Booker, or do you want to move on to somebody else?
Let's move on.
Let's do DeAndre Ayton, David. This was an interesting one for me. The score definitely bumped up recently, which I think I took recent play more into account with him because of the small sample size.
Yep.
8 for me, David. I have an 8 for DeAndre Ayton.
We agree. First time so far. It would be interesting to see how many we have the same score for. But I'm an 8, and we should get it out of the way straight away. I think, we might look back on his suspension as being the biggest reason that the Suns missed the playoffs. So I don't want to let him off for that. And some people, thinking about these grades might want to put the suspension into context. I'm just going with the play. I think, I'm moving on from that. And I think, so far it's been an 8 out of 10. I think it's been pretty much everything that we would have wanted him to, start the season with. And maybe, even though we might look on that suspension as being a negative to the Suns' playoff chances, maybe, just maybe it was something that, had a positive outcome for DeAndre Ayton in terms of the way he's come back and shown himself so far this season in the purple and orange, Max.
Yeah, it did seem like it was a bit of a reality check for him. I think it did do some good for him. I still would prefer it not have happened, but I think it is something that helped him. And if we're just grading on the last 2 games, it would probably be a 10, David. I just always wanted from him the whole time he's been a Sun. And even back at U of A, I think a big criticism of him was just the aggressiveness wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, there are still some issues. The mid-range is still a problem. He's taking too many of those junk shots. His field goal percentage is actually down from 58.5 last season to 53.4 this season so far. He had some struggle finishing in the Boston game. He missed a lot of bunnies in that game in the second half, especially, which is hard to see. Overall,
he killed Booker's triple-double with that left-handed layup. I hope they ribbed him about that one because, that was Booker's best chance at getting that last assist.
You got to make that play, DeAndre. Come on. Per 36, though, I think the blocks going from 1.1 to 1.9 is a huge number. Mm-hmm. You love seeing that. The rebounds going from 12 to 14.1. Again, I think 14.1 rebounds per 36. That's where it starts to be really impactful rebounding. So you like to see that. The free throw attempts have been a big problem this season, David. The Boston game was a nice aside from that, but he's got to average more than whatever he's averaging right now, 2.1 or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think they're putting him in some spots now where we should hopefully see that go up if he's a little bit more aggressive. The Boston game, it is only one game, but being the last game, we're hoping that it's going to be a window into his play going forward. But you highlighted on Twitter the little fake DHO handoff and attack the basket, take 1 or 2 dribbles and make a move. Didn't finish it, but that's not really the point with DeAndre at the moment. We just love seeing him do that. He put the ball down on the floor from the elbow a couple of times as well, which just really draws the defense and gets shooters like Mikal wide open when he does that. So, they've noted that he's doing a lot of film with Mark Bryant. So hopefully these are just the things that they're showing him and that gives him all the encouragement in the world to keep doing it. Because, I've tried to highlight it as much as possible. Even when he's not getting the touches, his gravity and role on this team for getting the offense going, there's probably no one more impactful, even including Devin Booker on this team when they're playing that way. It's just incredible the gravity that he has and how much he changes defenses on the offensive end, Max.
Absolutely, especially when the two are working together. And I still think they're underutilizing the Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton pick and roll. I would love to see the points per possession on that because it feels like it's a million. They score every single time when they do that thing. It's so devastating when they do it because when Ayton's rolling and Booker's got the ball coming off the screen, it's like you can't really guard that, David. It's very hard. Booker could just throw it 9 feet in the air, and Ayton, if he doesn't dunk it, will at least come down with it generally.
Yep.
It's just a really hard thing to defend. I'd like to see them use it more, but yeah, I guess final thought on Ayton would be the defense we should probably get into. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. It's just it's not even like he's making incredible reads on defense or anything. He's just doing the simple stuff. He's just being in the way. He's just like not letting players blow by him nearly as much as he was last season. You can only think of a couple times he did in the game against Boston. And the impact that you have when you have a 7-footer like him with that wingspan, just in the right position all the time, who's actually athletic and can affect shots to the rim. It's just massive, David.
This is what we've been talking about. This is why we've got so frustrated. I know people have, hated on us hating on DeAndre Ayton, but, it's because it was so simple. How many times last year did we talk about, just getting your hands up, being in the right position? You're a giant human. It's actually really hard for guys to finish over you. You don't have to block every shot. That's not what we're asking of DeAndre Ayton. And that's what we've seen this season. He's just in the right spot more often than he used to be. He's putting his hands up. They're having to go to things like getting him out in space in pick and roll to exploit him, which, as I said during the week, see that as a compliment. That's how he's going to learn even more. But the fact that he's just in the right spot most of the time, affecting so many shots around the rim, still able to go out and chase guards for 4 or 5 seconds a possession as well and finish off possessions that way. I love that, he's challenging threes and then just leaking down the court. I think someone's told him that's a very clear, if you challenge a 3-point shot, just keep running, because they've hit him on so many, I shouldn't say so many, but a lot of leak outs so far, which is just really awesome. And he's altering shots out on the perimeter. But, the defense was noticeable straight away from, game one before he got suspended. We could see it. It was a very tangible thing that you could see that something had clicked. I tweeted about this during the week. I don't know, and unless Ayton talks on it himself, I don't know how much credit we can give to, just time, his old coaches or his new coaches. I would say it's probably a third each to all of those things. We're just seeing as he goes along, he's learning where he needs to be. And it's just great to see. I'm just loving that side of the ball. And I'm loving the really recent aggression from him as well. And his teammates love it too. Booker got right into him in that Boston game, which is, it's really, I love those moments. They're quite heartwarming for me because, as someone that sits on the other side of the world just watching the broadcast, they're my little windows into the fact that, we're not wrong. All these things that we've been talking about clearly bother the team as well, or are in the team's thinking. Because when you see Booker react that way to an and one opportunity, it's very clear that he wants to encourage him to be more aggressive as well. And that's all we've been doing. We just want to see this more from DeAndre because we know he's capable of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's why all these people, more on Twitter than the podcast, we just call us haters on DeAndre Ayton. It's like, we don't hate him. We just want him to be good. We're not going to pretend he's good just because it makes Suns fans feel good and warm inside. And when he plays well, we're going to give him the credit, and he's playing well now. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. To be fair, I don't think anyone that's throwing that at us these days actually listens to the podcast, Max. I think our listeners that listen know that we talk about Ayton in pretty glowing terms when he plays well. And to end that, I suppose I wanted to throw the question. I alluded to it before with Mikhail at the top of the show, but other than trading for a bona fide current all-star, not an old all-star like Kevin Love or something like that, it's quite clear, right, that DeAndre's improvement is the biggest variable to this team making a jump.
Yeah, it's not even close, I wouldn't say. I think that, we saw it in the last 2 games, right? They were a different team, especially against New York. That was a different team than we saw all season. That's a higher ceiling than we've seen from them. And it's all because of him, man. If he can impact the game on both ends the way he did in that game, the sky's the limit then, because at that point, the thing the Suns have kind of lacked since Amari, I guess, is a real physical dominating force who can take over games that way. It's something in the NBA it's so key to have, and that's only DeAndre could be that. I mean, Devin Booker's dominating in his own way, but DeAndre is the physical freak who could change the ceiling of the team, and so yeah, absolutely, don't you think?
Yep, agree with you 100%. Let's end the big ticket items here with new dad, Ricky Rubio, Max.
Ricky Rubio, one of the harder ones to grade for me, Dave. I don't know about you.
Yes, very difficult.
Ended up giving him a 6, actually.
Ooh.
The inconsistency, the shot selection was poor. And again, this is based on expectations, and I know Ricky Rubio is good. I knew before the season started he was good at basketball. He's been such a stabilizing force that I think he definitely needed to be on the positive side of things. But just purely compared to where I thought he was going to be, a 6 for me, David.
I love that we are so different on this one because it's hopefully going to have some good conversation after I give my rating, which is a 9.
Wow, really? That's really interesting to me. So you think he's had like almost the best possible season, blowing away your preseason expectations?
I think he is what he is, and he's showing that. He's got career highs at the moment in points and assists. So he's been everything that I knew Ricky Rubio to be, and possibly a little bit more. And then the intangible stuff and an impact on this team weighs heavily into my rating as well, Max.
Yeah, no, I think that's all fair. Maybe it's just that I expected some of that stuff is the reason why I didn't have it quite as high. I mean, and for me, it's really he's still at a 51% true shooting. The scoring from him it's really poor. We knew that going in, but again, this is about whether or not my expectations were exceeded or not. And he's been about the same scorer I thought he would be, maybe even a little bit worse than I was hoping he would be. But yeah, in terms of the stabilizing thing, in terms of the assists, the production, we both hypothesized that it might be better on this team than it has been recently, and he's done that. So maybe it was a little unfair to give him a 6 here because he kind of is achieving the optimistic view of what we had for him before the season. So maybe it should be more like a 7 or something like that. But I hesitate to go to a 9, David. For a 9 for Ricky Rubio to me would have to be a near all-star performance, I think.
That's fair enough. And again, we're going to touch on it a bit. Everyone's voted a little bit differently here. I wouldn't back down from your vote either. I think, a 6 can be talked about, in the right context and be justified. I think there's a lot of frustration with Ricky Rubio when he doesn't play well or he's not hitting shots or, he's forcing shots. And, I think, there's a genuine conversation. He's a floor raiser, but, is he a ceiling raiser, Max? I think assuming that everyone takes the leaps that we want them to, there is a fair question around, what's the ceiling of a team with Ricky Rubio as the starting point guard? I think that's a very, very fair question to ask. I'm not sure if you've got an answer to that, but, as well as I've rated him, I do think that, they might have a ceiling of, first round knockout or something, particularly with his age. He's probably only going to be this player. He's not going to make another huge leap himself and all of a sudden be an amazing 3-point shooter or anything. So, maybe I've been a little bit too nice to him coming off the back of, terrible seasons and terrible point guard play, but I'm really enjoying having a good, competent point guard on the floor, and that's why my rating's so high, Max.
Yeah, totally. And to address your question, I do think there's a ceiling with Ricky Rubio, and it may be a first-round exit. But I think kind of the point of him is not to be, the point guard on the championship Phoenix Suns. The point of him is to be, the bridge that gets us towards there.
Exactly.
You can't develop Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, and DeAndre Ayton in a system that starts as a candidate point guard. You just can't. They had to get somebody who could actually be an adult, and I hate this term, but I use it with him all the time because he deserves it, a floor general.
Yep.
They had to have that. They got it for him, and I think they will look to transition to whether it's Jalen McHugh or Ty Jerome or whoever they draft in this draft or whoever. They're going to have to get somebody younger and a little more on the same timeline as these guys to be the point guard. But I think he's the perfect bridge player.
I love that you brought up Mikal, Booker, and Ayton there because I think Booker's hopefully going to be an all-star this year on the back of better team play and him maybe taking a small leap himself, even though we think that he's just being the player that he was always working into. He hasn't just come out of nowhere with this play this season. So Rubio's helped towards that. We've noted the last couple of pods the effect that he's had on Mikal Bridges. It's just ridiculous, quite frankly, how much better Mikal is on the floor with Ricky Rubio, which is maybe another argument for him starting. And then it leads to Ayton. I think for these last 40 games, other than keeping one small eye on the playoffs and hopefully that keeps us entertained for most of the rest of the season, I really want to see the chemistry between DeAndre and Ricky Rubio and see if he can really raise Ayton up as a player for the rest of this season, Max.
Yep. No, absolutely. I think that's the key to his presence on this team in general. Should we move on to the next group of guys? You have them termed as kind of the role players?
Yeah, let's bounce around and we can spend more time on some than others, but that's the section we're moving into here, guys.
Dario Saric, another one I thought was kind of difficult to grade. I ended up going with the 6. Again, relative to my expectations for the season, I think he's been better than I thought he was going to be, but just not a ton better.
Yep, I agree with you on the 6. Much maligned within the fan base, I think. The benching stuff was just really weird. Hopefully Monty just takes the L on that one and realizes he made a little bit more of a mistake. But again, we're talking about the last 2 games a lot, which is a sneaky trap to fall into on the eve of a game against the Spurs here tonight. But the last 2 games are kind of the window into what he can do. 12 points, 8.5 boards, and 4 assists. I just think that Dario is like the perfect 5th starter on this team at the moment, Max.
Yep, I agree. I said earlier that I think he's kind of being the glue guy that we needed, him and Mikal. So definitely on the positive side of 5. I hope he trends more towards how he's been playing lately. There has been some slumps with him, and I agree with you. The benching was absurd. I really hope that we're not going to see any more chicanery like that, David.
Is there any way to answer the what is future in Phoenix's question right now, or do we need the last 40 games?
Oh, man, it's such a hard one. I think we need the last 40 games, David.
Yeah.
I really do. I think right now it's up in the air. I mean, if you would have asked me last week, I think I said no chance last week. And now it feels like, he's the perfect guy to have as the guy around long term. So I have no idea, David. Again, some of these guys are swinging wildly. And let's get to another guy who swung wildly, David. How about Mikal Bridges? What do you got for him?
I've got a 7. How about you?
I have a 5. And the reason why is because if you asked me this 2 weeks ago, I would have had like a 3. So
yep.
I need to keep things in perspective. If you asked me about the last 2 games, I would say a 9. So I need to keep things in perspective. I really hope we're going to see an 8 or a 9 from him for the rest of the season. I hope Boston is a preview of things to come, and not just Boston. I mean, he has been a lot better in the Atlanta game, New York game. He's been good lately. But the Boston, as you say, was his breakout game. I hope we see that the rest of the season. We see, obviously not quite that good, but more like that than we've seen in the past. He actually makes threes. He actually does stuff on offense. But I have a hard time. Based on my expectations of him, David, I was somebody who said he looked like a star in preseason. Yeah. So it's hard for me to go above a 5.
Yeah, I think, I've got the question for you here. Is he the exact same player as 18-19 season?
Oh, that's really interesting.
Because I looked at his stats to let you think about it a little bit, but I looked at his stats and they're pretty much identical other than a percentage efficiency boost, but that's mostly because of the cuts from Rubio and the fact that he's shooting less threes, which aren't taking his overall efficiency percentages down. But if you look at everything else, he's pretty much the same guy on less minutes. So, as positive as I am about Mikal, I totally understand that the people that wanted to see him take a leap. I think he's showing more windows into things. The Boston shot. And then obviously the 6 threes as well. At the end of the day, it really all comes down to the shot overall, whether he takes a leap or not. But yeah, just a little bit of perspective there is I think he's pretty much the same guy that we saw in his rookie year.
Thank you for giving me time to think about that. Offensively, I agree. I think offensively he's about the same. He's a little bit more efficient, or actually a decent amount more efficient, but kind of a similar guy. I think defensively he's a lot better than he was. And he was already pretty good. But he just is every rookie sometimes has lapses and they just get tired. And it's hard to be a rookie in the NBA. I think you're seeing the effect of his offseason. Apparently a complete gym rat from everything we've heard. Yeah. I think you see it with him. He's stronger. He's more consistent. He's definitely the best defender on the team, I think, without even a question. Mm-hmm. And he may have been last year, but it wasn't with an exclamation mark like it is now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, he got pushed around a lot in his rookie year. We noted that quite a lot as we went through the season on the pod. And didn't leave the Suns facility over the offseason. So clearly put on a little bit of strength there. But it all comes down to that defense and shot. If he becomes a 38% three-point shooter, I think, he's a top 50 player easily in the NBA because of that defense and the perfect complement to Booker and Ayton. So another one, as we go through here, just because I don't want to pin everyone's rest of the season just on the playoffs, there's a lot of things to watch for this team going forward, and Mikal's definitely one of them, Max. Yeah,
oh, absolutely. If he can become a legit 3-and-D guy, like we said earlier, that is one of the keys to this team becoming really an actual playoff contender. But Aaron Baines, let's go to Aaron Baines, another one who I just struggled like hell to grade. I ended up going with a 6 for him, David.
Yep.
Really buoyed by his start. I mean, he was like an MVP candidate in the first 14 games or whatever it was. Like, that was ridiculous. Obviously, he was never going to keep that up, but it's unfortunate to see him fall off as far as he has, especially offensively. And, we're seeing some of his limitations as a defender even too, the lack of athleticism. But overall, he's still a really, really positive force. I think he's a large part of what's helping Ayton. Ayton even credits him. It's pretty obvious to see that from him. He had a moment from the bench last night. I can't remember after what play it was, but he was just going crazy, going wild. You brought this point up before, that any thoughts of him like not being happy? If it's the case, it ain't being shown. He's an amazing teammate.
He's the first guy celebrating and the first guy off the bench at a timeout, et cetera, et cetera. So yep. I don't need to say any more on that. I was a 6 as well. The grade definitely goes up for the hot start. And also probably much like my Ricky Rubio one, it kind of is buoyed, I'm going to say, because I love the difference in between how you pronounce buoyed and I say buoyed. One of my favorite things about our different languages, Max. But the leadership and locker room stuff, and then the impact on Ayton, which I just think you can't remove from the conversation. I think after the Boston game, or before the Boston game, there was a great quote from Brad Stevens, which you should go find if you haven't heard that one, guys. And then after the game, there was a quote directly from DeAndre Ayton about the effect that both Rubio and Baines have on him and the team. I think the team still values his D, even though, he has dropped off 33% from 3 on the season, so that's really dropped off as well, as you said. The only other thing I really wanted to note is he's 70 minutes away, Max, from his total minutes played for Boston last season, and you add that to the World Cup run, and I'm a little bit worried about him and Ricky Rubio, and we're coming into a really important stretch, which we're going to discuss at the end of the show here. But I'm just worried. I think we need to find rest for these guys, or it might backfire very, very soon. And I think the original plan, which is a guy we're going to get onto probably next, was for Frank and Baines to kind of give each other rests every odd game here and there, based on who was hot and who was not. But we just haven't had a chance to do that with Ayton's suspension, Baines' injuries, and now Frank's injuries.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You'd really like to see Baines get some nights off, especially in back-to-back situations, things like that. He shouldn't be playing as much as he is. He just kind of is out of necessity, so it's unfortunate. Let's go ahead and move on to somebody you just mentioned, Frank Kaminsky. Obviously, he's been out for a little while now, and how much longer is he out again, David?
I don't. Very like the Suns here. I don't think there's really a timetable on that, Max.
That is very Sunsy, not to release one. But I had him with a 3, David. I had low expectations for him anyway. He wasn't. So that stretch where we didn't have Baines or Ayton, it was impossible, David. He wasn't filling in that. I realized that is not what he is supposed to do, really. But that was just such a bad stretch. I just don't think he's a very good NBA player, David. His offense hasn't been as good as I was hoping it was going to be. I knew his defense was going to suck. I don't know. I don't really want to harp on this too much. I just don't like him, David.
Yeah, I'm a 5, and we're the same on some here, and then wildly different on others. And I think it's just the way that we graded on a curve here. But the reason I'm a 5 is look at his Phoenix numbers versus his career numbers, and he's pretty much. He is who he is. So he's just giving us exactly what he is. Obviously, when he signed, you always hope that you get a bump like we have with Ricky Rubio or we did with Aaron Baines at the start, but that just hasn't come with Frank. He basically is just the same player that he has been throughout his whole career. So again, I thought the original plan was to probably play him a lot more sparingly than what they've had to. Mix him up at the 4 and the 5 where they needed him from night to night. Give Baines a chop out every now and then when they don't really need a real physical guy off the bench at the 5. But they've missed him maybe a little bit recently, just in terms of his shooting and spacing. Some of those games where we just couldn't hit the side of a barn, I think we could have done with him. But not much more to say on Frank. He's been relatively disappointing, and then the injury is just kind of salt into the wound there, Max.
It is. Let's go to Tyler Johnson. Don't want to linger on this one either. I gave him a 2, David.
I'm a 1. I had to give him a 1. He has just been horrible. You look at his career numbers versus his season. He's shooting 38% from the field, 27% from 3, and he had a real opportunity to take a guard spot here at the start of the season, and he failed. And not only that, it's probably more him getting exploited a little bit on defense. Terrible shot selection, I think, in some of the times that he has been given a chance. And probably the only excuse, which I've brought up a couple of times, is he has been poorly used or often used as a bit of a Mr. Fix-It. So, but, you just have to grade what you see. And as someone who's been very positive about Tyler in the past, I had to give him a very bad score here, Max.
Yeah, it's hard to do anything else with him, unfortunately. Let's move to Cam Johnson, another one that was hard for me. I gave him a 6. He has been in and out of the rotation a little bit, but he's been pretty good for a rookie, and the shot's beautiful, so I'm going above 5, David.
Yep, I'm going 7, 40% from 3 on 4.4 attempts. Another guy who is what he is, but he's done it from college to the pros, so that's always a positive when you see that, because you just don't know, even though there probably wasn't a guy that you could be confident in a skill translating more than Cam Johnson. And then he's shown some other flashes, which you want to see from rookies in that time on the floor. He's a pretty good team defender. He sneaks in for offensive boards, 1.7 per 36, which is kind of my favorite thing about him and something that I always watch for. He's got good fluidity in transition, probably even better than what I was positive about in the pre-draft process, which has kind of been good to see. And sneaky athleticism, he's got up for a couple of putbacks and dunks, which is kind of good to see for a guy that gets, a lot of jokes made about, his age and, how much he isn't an athlete, I suppose, and just a shooter. Just need to see him kind of be set up a little bit more in set plays and things, and I think we'll really see it. And probably my favorite thing from the season so far is his chemistry with Mikhail. It's just like two high IQ guys knowing their games and working really well together. So I hope we see them a little bit more. But I'll throw a question for you. The draft is a mess right now outside of, Jar and Zion's about to come back and probably show everyone how good he is. But, what number best player can Cam maybe end up being in the 2019 draft, Max?
Yeah, because the draft is so bad, the fact that he can shoot at his size alone could get him possibly towards the top 5 of this draft.
Yep.
Especially if he can develop a little bit more off the dribble and maybe, become more of a scoring force than just a 3-point shooter, which he's seen a little bit of that so far. I actually think he could be quite good for a long time. I don't really see star potential with him, especially given his age.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly happy with getting him instead of some of the other guys who went in that range. Although, some guys showing some signs of life, like Sakut Boy has been pretty good for the Pistons. Even Rui's a little better than people thought he was going to be. Washington, obviously, Brandon Clark's been great. So it looks like this draft might have a decent number of role players. It's just the star. There's just no stars in it.
Yeah, you just go through that lottery, and even later, I guess the names even later in the 20s probably have a better chance right now based on what we've seen. But you couldn't argue to me that there's 3 definite other guys that make up a top 5 in 3 years' time that are above Cam Johnson right now, which is a positive.
Absolutely. I want to clarify what I just said, though. I said no stars. I don't mean no stars. There are 2 obvious stars in this draft. I just meant there's very few compared to what you generally think a draft would have in terms of that upside. Let's go ahead and move on to Ty Jerome. I wanted to give him an incomplete, David. He's barely played. I gave him a 2 just because he hasn't been able to help, and we thought he may be able to. The reason why he wasn't a 1 was probably because I actually thought he looked okay against Boston in the limited minutes. Didn't do a lot, but showed some of the smart stuff, had a nice rebound. So gave him a 2, David.
Playing power forward against Boston as well.
Yeah.
I gave him a 3. I had my concerns, just about his athleticism coming in and translating, and there hasn't been much to convince me otherwise just yet, but I haven't put a line through that. Not sure why he hasn't been playing in the G League a little bit more, to be honest. I think that would have, he came in and really dominated. I watched his couple of games in the G League and he dominated, looked above the competition. But if he's not going to play night to night and you have other guard options on the bench, I think you've got to give him a stint at some point. Maybe we see that after the trade deadline or something like that. He hasn't been used very well either. I think he was, thrown straight to the Wolves as the backup point guard. And then, when Monty had seen enough that he wasn't capable of doing that, then he just hasn't been used at all. So I'd like to see him maybe try and use his shooting a little bit more, which we've noted on the pod a couple of times. But, as the guy high on him, based on what you've seen so far, what's his ceiling in the NBA still, Max, if everything goes right for Ty Jerome?
I still think he could be a really helpful player. He's just such a smart guy on the court. He does so many smart things on both ends. I think it's going to be, for him, the strength is going to be huge. He's never going to be fast. He's never going to be somebody who, who's going to stick with people, on the perimeter or blow by people. He's got to just get really, really, really strong and just use his height. And sort of like I always use the Andre Miller comp, but even a James Harden, like not anything close to James Harden, don't get me wrong. But the fact that James Harden isn't, he's just really, really, really freaking strong. I think that Ty Jerome could become an okay post defender like James Harden is if he just gets really, really strong. Because that's going to be how he's okay on defense. And then offensively, it's just getting to the point where he can use his brilliant IQ And I actually think he hasn't been as smart on offense when he got more minutes before than I expected. I think largely he seems like somebody who's panicking a little bit.
Yes.
And I think that he just needs to get more time. I think you're right up the G League point. It doesn't make a lot of sense to not have him there, especially if you're not going to play him. I guess maybe he'll play a little bit. I mean, I was surprised he played against Boston. Didn't play a lot, obviously. Like I think it was just 5 minutes in the first half. But I'm wondering if that's time to come. Maybe Monty's seeing things from him in practice. I know. Remember, Devin Booker was really raving about him in practice before the season started. So maybe it's one of these things where he looks really good in practice, and then maybe when the lights come on, he panics a little bit, and hopefully that'll smooth out. We'll see. I'm still pretty high on him, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed with what I've seen so far.
Yeah, he just looks a little overwhelmed by the pace of the game when he comes in. And it's not easy for these guys when you just get thrown 3 minutes here and there to try and prove yourself. So, yeah, I think he's going to be fine long term. I still think at his absolute ceiling, he could be, the number one guard off the bench in either spot if everything works out for him. So let's just hope that he can, be given a chance at some point to show that kind of IQ. And yeah, I think with his size, as you said, he can definitely make up for some of his weaknesses. But let's move on to what we're calling the rest after doing the rookies here, Max. And it is the last 4 players on the roster. I don't know about you. I don't have a lot to say about these guys, but I did make up a fake award for each of them to round out this section, Max.
All right, why don't you go ahead and give me your fake awards, and I'll just counter by giving my score.
Okay, I've given Okobo a 5, and my award for him is, I can't believe you're still here, but I'm still kinda intrigued.
I can't believe you gave him a 5, David. I gave him an 8, and it was a question whether I was giving him a 9. We thought he might be cut, David. We thought he might be cut, and he was been contributing.
That's true. Anything else to say on Okobo, or else I'll give you my Carter award?
No, he's fine. He's not very good, but he's better than I thought he was going to be.
So you know how we have the Dan Marley Hustle Award for the Suns, yes. Max? I'm going to give Javon Carter the I Appreciate the Hustle Ronnie Price Award. And that is that I really enjoy the hustle that he shows out on the court, but the results just don't show as much as what you would hope for the amount of hustle. And I've given him a 4.
Again, I didn't think he was going to play, so I gave him an 8. So I think I'm just grading. We're doing this differently, I think.
That's all right.
But yeah, I think he's a terrible decision maker, but I think he can shoot a little bit more than I thought he could, and obviously defense is nice, so give him an 8. Hit
some big shots when the second unit was struggling in that Boston game. So
yep.
Yeah, he definitely can shoot a little bit better than some of our other guys on the team. Check Diallo, I've given the you probably should have played more minutes, and I don't know if that's your fault or Monty's award, and I've given him a 4 as well, Max.
Again, gave him a 7. Didn't really think he was going to play very much. Think he's been okay. If there was a stretch there when he first started where he looked really good. Now he's just kind of okay. So gave him a 7 again. Didn't think he was going to play.
Yep, and Jalen LeCue, not applicable for a vote or a number here, but my award is Be Patient, Young Pup.
I will say I loved what we saw, that burst in the New York game at the very end when he did something. And he missed a shot, but the burst is nice. That guy's really fast. If he can put it together as far as shooting and feel, he could be a real special player. I'm not even kidding when I say that. But yeah, I can't even grade him because he hasn't played.
Should we move on to Did You Know, Max?
Yep, let's get started.
Well, Max, with DeAndre Ayton setting his career high for rebounds the other night versus the Knicks, I thought we'd focus on all things rebounds for this episode. So did you know the record for rebounds in a single game was 55? Not quite 75 to match up with the episode number this week, which would have been nice, but can you tell me who once had 55 rebounds in a single damn game, Max?
I mean, my only guess has to be Wilt Chamberlain.
It was Wilt Chamberlain, who had 31 in a half, but only 34 points in a loss for the Warriors against the Celtics. In fact, Max, another quick quiz for you. How many of the top rebound games do you think Wilt and Bill Russell share before another name is even mentioned?
Oh, God, it's probably a lot. I'm going to say like a dozen.
A dozen is right on the money. The answer is 12. And then the name that comes in is Nate Thurman. And then there's another 12 Wilton but Bill games before anyone again. So those two share 52 of the top 56 rebounding games on the leaderboard. But in more modern times, since 1979, your leaderboard is Moses Malone, Charles Oakley, Kareem, Dennis Rodman, and Ronnie Seekley, with anywhere between 37 and 34 boards. Just below them, though, Max, sits a player who also sits in the leaderboard for most offensive boards in a game, 18, half, 13, and in a quarter, 11. Any guesses who that might be, Max?
Ooh, Dennis Rodman?
Ooh, Dennis Rodman's probably leading the leaderboard. I should point out they're not all records for offensive rebounds, but I am talking about none other than Charles Barkley, Max, who had 33 rebounds for the Houston Rockets in a game that should be in Suns folklore of sorts. It was his first game against his previous team, the Phoenix Suns. Barkley's 25 defensive and 8 offensive effort to go along with 20 points in 45 minutes was good enough for 110-95 win over the Suns on November 2, 1996. But Max, not only did Barkley get revenge in that game, he out-rebounded the entire Suns team 33-30. I'll give you 5 points per name here, Max. Can you name any of the Suns that recorded a rebound in a game in November of 1996, and there were 8 of them?
Kevin Johnson?
No.
Oh, Elliot. Was that an Elliot Perez in the team?
No.
I'm just going to give up, David. Why don't you tell me?
Wesley Person had 11. Michael Finley had 5. Sam Cassell had 4. AC Green had 3. Robert Horry had 5. Rex Chapman had 1. Chucky Brown had 1. And Steve Nash had 1 rebound. And only 2 players that played and did not record a board in that game were Danny Ainge and Wayman Tisdale. What a roster that one was, Max.
Jesus Christ, wow.
But more on the Suns specifically now. There are no Phoenix players on the leaderboard for most rebounds in a game in either the old or new eras, Max. Want to take a stab at how many boards Ayton needs in a game to become the record holder for the Suns?
Ooh, interesting. I'll say 15.
Hang on. Total boards.
Sorry. I think you're talking about average.
One game. How many does he need in one game to be the record holder?
28.
Right on the money again. You're nailing it this segment. 28 if he wants the outright lead. And I won't throw any more quizzes at you, Max, because you've had enough. But before I tell you who sits in the leaders for Phoenix, what's your on whether Ayton ever gets 28 for the Suns?
I'm gonna go with yes. I can see it, especially with the pace of play these days, just how dominant the rebounder he is. I can see it.
Yep, I agree with you. So now it was Tyson Chandler who sits at the top with Paul Silas, both with 27 boards against Atlanta in 2016 and Cincinnati in 1971, respectively. Then there's the round mound of rebound Barkley with 26 in 95 against his future team, the Houston Rockets, followed by Neil Walk on 26 and Maurice Lucas on 25. As we know and have mentioned on this pod a lot over its history, not exactly a storied history of bigs in the desert, Max. But I mentioned Paul Silas, who holds the record for the most rebounds in a single season and for his Phoenix career, which is 12.1 for both. And it's Alvin Adams who holds the total rebound record with 6,937 in the purple and orange. So I'm going to predict that Ayton breaks that 12.1 single season record at some stage. He's actually at 12.3 this year, although I'm not sure whether he would qualify with missing a large portion of the season. And just a tiny bit of math for you this episode and the listeners, Max. I'm also going to predict that he leads the franchise in total rebounds because he's played 83 games so far in his career, so essentially a full season, averaging 10.6 rebounds per game. 8 full seasons at 10.6 is 6,954, so just surpassing Alvin Adams. But Max, no more math, as I don't have a number trick to get to episode 75 for us today, but I'll leave you with this. In 1975, the Suns made the finals, and Alvin Adams, Gar Heard, and Curtis Perry all averaged 9 boards or more for the season. So, Max, let's talk about the Suns and how they might get over 9 in the standings and make an impossible run to the NBA Finals yet again, shall we?
I'm sure it's going to happen. It's obvious. Yeah, let's do it. So let's start with the upcoming next 6 games, David. I'm just going to read them off because they're important.
Yeah.
We got the San Antonio Spurs at home, the Pacers at home, at the Spurs, at the Grizzlies, at the Mavericks, then the Thunder at home. David, there's a fair number of teams in that group who matter to us.
There are, and if you look at it even further, which we'll go into for the whole of February, which is quite tough. February, the first game is that OKC game that you mentioned, but we don't play another Western Conference bubble team in the whole month of February. So this week coming up, and the first Spurs game might already be done by the time some people are listening to this, but it is huge. We talked about that Knicks to Knicks run being huge, but they faltered a little bit there. But this one is even bigger because you've got double points games, as I like to call them, coming up here against the Spurs, Memphis, and even OKC to some degree, Max.
Yep, and the Suns have one of the hardest. It was the hardest before the Celtics game. I don't know if it still is, but at least one of the hardest schedules in the league remaining. So they're going to have to win these double points games, as you phrase them, because they're probably not going to have the best record among these teams remaining overall, I would guess. So they're going to have to knock off some of their opponents, especially these two Spurs games. I mean, I would say the Grizzlies and the Spurs are probably the most likely teams to get the 8th seed right now, just because the Grizzlies have that lead on it, and the Spurs are right there. So if they can sweep the Spurs here, it would just be monumental for their playoff chances, David.
Totally. And we owe them one from the Mexico game, and then we should probably add another one on top of that just for good measure. So we'll definitely be hoping this week that they can win both of those, or at least split it, Max. And then they've really got to try and win that Memphis one. And if they can really get on a roll and win one of Indiana or Dallas. Dallas has been struggling a little bit recently, but it is away. So that'll be tough going into what is, as I said, a very, very tough February, which I'll just go over really quickly. There's 6 home games against the Thunder, Houston, Denver, the Warriors, the Clippers, and Detroit, and 7 away games against Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Detroit, the Lakers, Toronto, Chicago, and Utah. That's 8 of 13 against plus 500 teams, Max. And as I said before, 0 games against bubble teams unless you count the Oklahoma City Thunder. Interestingly, though, we're 9-10 away from home so far this season. A bit of a giveaway sometimes on playoff teams is whether they can hover around 500 away from home and then be better than that at home. We haven't been better than that at home so far this season, but a good little tidbit, and still have the best net rating as well. So, and there are a couple of things, in our favor in terms of staying in that playoff hunt, Max.
Yep, I think there's a decent chance. I think the Suns, when they're playing well and they have all their guys, they probably are the best team among the teams vying for the 8th seed. The issue is just the hole they've dug at themselves now. Yeah. Like the loss to you brought up the loss to the Spurs. There's also the one to the Blazers that was by 1, or I think it was by 1. And then there are a couple other ones. There's a Utah loss that comes to mind. I think that one Denver loss. You can't lose those type of games and make the playoff. Those are really the swing games, and unless they really start to have luck more favor them in those close games going forward, that's going to be a big differential between whether or not they make the playoffs or not, David.
Yeah, I totally agree. You look at a win like Boston, you want to get, really excited about it, which I certainly was, but it's essentially just a makeup for some of those bad losses that they've had. And they probably need a few more of those big ones in February to make up for some of the bad ones that they've had, as you said. But I went and looked back at our good friend Zona's article on win predictions for the season. I believe you said 35. I said 32 at the time, but I actually came up to 35 once I looked at the schedule properly. So, we're 18 after 42 here, so 40 games to go. Do you want to change, or are you still sitting in that range?
No, I feel pretty good about that mark right now, dude. I think it's exactly where they're going to land. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they can do a little bit better. They certainly were on pace for that earlier, and as of late have been playing very well, obviously. Although we need to keep in perspective, David. I mean, you've been harping on this since even before the season started, I think, how this stretch of games was going to be our stretch. They did okay against it. They did pretty well. They did fine against it. We would like to see them do a little better against it, to be honest. But, we knew this was going to be kind of a good time, or at least hopefully, or else all the wheels would be coming off if it weren't. So, we'll see how they can carry this into a stretch where they're playing better teams.
Yeah, they probably didn't capitalize just as much as I would have hoped. They're probably just under expectations, even though it's a positive record overall. But before we move on to the bubble teams, the Feb 6 trade deadline is coming up real quick. There's only actually 9 Suns games to go before that deadline. So we haven't touched on the deadline. We'll probably do that in the next episode, or probably the one after that, with the deadline so close, Max. But, what do you think the Suns are going to do, just to, I guess, tease a longer episode in the future? I've got some ideas around it, but, 9 games before that deadline, is there anything they can do to make a little bit of a run here in these hard stretches?
I think they're much more likely to be buyers than sellers, for sure. But I don't see them being big buyers. That would be a small thing. I think just like a minor upgrade, maybe like another 4 or something. But I don't expect anything huge. Do you?
Yeah, we didn't grade James Jones or Monty here with our mid-season scorecards, but I'd like to see James Jones just fix the end of the roster here because we've seen it in the past with even drafting Dragan Bender and Marquise Chris together. It's like it's just not a good idea to have 4 guards at the end of your bench because when you are a little bit short, then Monty has to roll out a 4-guard lineup with Baines and you lose a 10-0 run in a minute and a half or whatever it was. So James has got to fix that at some point. They know more than us, Max, that they've got to make decisions on these guards and make a choice on who they think actually has the best future with the team, not just hold on to all of them hoping that one eventually proves them right and then they can get rid of the rest. It's just all out of whack at the moment, and probably my biggest criticism on James, and my rotations are probably the biggest criticism on Monty, but he's kind of hands are tied a little bit there.
Yeah, you're right. I should have said guard rather than forward. What they really need is a third guard who can consistently play 20 minutes for them. Okobo is just not quite ready for that role yet. He's been okay, but he's probably our best option right now, but that's just kind of showing how bad our options are. Javon's been doing it a little bit. Obviously, we talked about Ty Jerome. He's not there. They need to consolidate some of that into more of a veteran guy, some sort of a rental, and maybe some team would be willing to take on Okobo and Javon for that, just to take a look at it. That's definitely what they need to stabilize things the most, because I think Chris Hansen was pointing this out on Twitter. When Devin Booker hasn't been on the floor, even over these last 10 games, the Suns have been really bad, David. They've been awesome enough with him on the floor to win a bunch of games, but the guard situation is definitely their biggest problem.
Yep, they need to fix it. So hopefully, I'm not expecting major trades or major swings here. I know a lot of Suns fans are still hoping for it. We get excited around the deadline, but just a small tinker to give them a little bit more of a bench here for the rest of the season would probably be the smart move. But we should finish off here with just a bit more of a discussion on the bubble teams and who we think they are, Max. I've put them into 3 tiers if you want me to rattle them off, and you can say whether you disagree or not.
Sure. Give it to me.
My first tier is the just want to wait for the deadline tier. I'm just not sure that we should totally disclude or remove OKC in their own tier here to potentially opening up an extra playoff spot. What's your thoughts on that?
I would be shocked if OKC didn't make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to sell. I don't see why they would. What are they going to sell? Obviously, Chris Paul's not tradable, really. Danilo Gallinari has been the one talked about so much, but I don't really see why they wouldn't try to re-sign him and maybe trade him down the line on a decent contract or something. They're what they're doing right now, and their fans care about this, man. This is cool. They're 24-19. They're a good team. They're fun to watch too. It's great developmental minutes for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I just don't understand why they would sell at all. So I fully expect to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I largely agree with you. I just want to wait that 2 weeks just to wait and see. But my second tier is the tier that's all but eliminated unless they do something drastic before the deadline, and that is the Kings and Minnesota, both with a negative 3.3 point differential, the worst of all these teams that we're discussing. And I think we've done this a lot and eliminated teams, and they've come back from the dead so far this season, but they just don't look like playoff teams at all to me.
I agree with where you put them in the tier. I also agree with you that we can't write them off. We can't write anybody off. We wrote Memphis off, obviously. That was a mistake.
Exactly.
I think they have the least chance of these teams to make the playoffs for sure. I'm not going to rule out Karl-Anthony Towns. I guess if I had to pick one of them, I'd pick Minnesota. Sacramento does feel pretty dead in the water.
Yep, and then the final tier, and unfortunately it's still a big one, including Phoenix. I've got the new and improved bubble team version 15.0. As we've said, this has changed quite a lot, and teams just keep coming back from the dead. So I've got the Grizzlies and the Spurs, as you mentioned before, Phoenix sitting in the middle, and then Portland and the New Orleans Pelicans. So that's 5 into 1 or maybe 6 into 2 if my prediction or hope with OKC comes to fruition, Max.
It's such an interesting tier. I kind of feel like they all have kind of the same odds of making it, weirdly.
Yep.
I think all teams have arguments for them. Obviously Memphis is playing the best right now. The Spurs have the history. The Portland has Damian Lillard. And the Pelicans, Zion's looming. And then, of course, the Suns, they've been the best team of these teams so far this season. They have the best point differential. I think you said they have the best net rating. Devin Booker is playing like he might be the best player on any of these teams right now. So, I think you can make an argument for any of the teams. It's going to be really fascinating to see it shake out. I hope it doesn't end in great disappointment for us, David.
Me too. But yeah, glad we kind of agree on that final tier. And I think, that's the teams we have to watch out for at the moment. There's still probably a lot that's going to change here, but, ranking them, I'd probably put them in order of the way that I listed them there, which is very much in line with what you said. I think of Memphis and the Spurs being the kind of Monties at the moment, with Phoenix sitting right in the middle there, and then a couple of real threats behind us who have the kind of star power, I suppose. So, it's going to keep it fun. And really, I've changed my expectations or hopes, really. I'm hoping that the Suns can keep us interested in that conversation for as long as the season goes on for, and don't move into development mode or anything like that, particularly with the deadline coming up. I don't think you're going to see us be sellers or anything like that. I think we're going to go for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd rather see Ayton and Mikal continue to do this than make the playoffs, to be honest with you. And if we can make the playoffs because Ayton and Mikal continue to do this, all the better. That's definitely the most important thing, right? Is that these guys look like they look like in Boston and New York. Yep.
Let's move on, Max.
Okay. Yeah, actually, my last question, or my first 7 seconds or less question ties into this. So are you ready for that?
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right. 7 seconds or less. He has 7 seconds or less to answer 3 questions for which he has not prepared. I'm about to ask him right now, David. Ready for question number 1?
I sure am.
Question number 1. Who actually does get the 8th seed among the West contenders? I know you ranked them, but in your heart, in your gut, who actually gets the 8th
seed? This might change drastically if we beat them a couple of times this week, but my money's on the Spurs at the moment, just with DeMar DeRozan playing as well as he is, LaMarcus Aldridge changing his game a little bit, and the best coach of the group, at least, maybe not the entire NBA. So I'm not betting against the Spurs right now, Max.
Yep, they're playing a lot better now. They look like the team that's coming on. We'll see. It'd be a cool story if Memphis held on to it. Obviously, it'd be the best story if Phoenix did it, but I'm with you. San Antonio. All right, next question. This is more trade deadline related. Would you trade Cam Johnson for a vet rental if you knew it would guarantee us the 8th seed?
No chance in hell. Cam Johnson is a long-term piece on this team, if not throw in to a much, much bigger deal that isn't a rental. So, no, I'm not chasing the 8th seed to, get beaten in 5 games by the Lakers with a move like that. No way.
Agree. Final question. Earlier this year, you, Calvin, and I on this podcast all said we'd rather keep Cam Johnson than Mikal Bridges. Have you changed your mind on that one, David?
Yes. I hate myself for even answering the other way the first time. I just think Mikal at his ceiling is the perfect complement, and I think that's why they made the move on draft day that they did for Mikal. So love Cam Johnson. He's going to have his own role on this team as a role player around those big two, but Mikal can be a bona fide third piece with his defense. So I would go Mikal at the moment.
It's a nice lesson to us on the importance of looking out for recency bias, right?
Yes.
We were obviously captured in a moment of Mikal's barely playing. It looked bad for him. Cam was shooting well, and we just fell in love with what we were seeing then. It was probably always Mikal was the right answer. So just want to point out to those people who think I don't admit when I'm wrong, we don't admit when we're wrong. We were very wrong about that, David.
I'm far from perfect, Max. I make a lot of mistakes.
As do the rest of us human beings. But that is it for us. Please rate, review, and subscribe. We appreciate it. David, anything else?
No reviews. I'd encourage people to get them through if you're still thinking about it, because we love to read them out and love the feedback more than anything. So shoot those through. We've already touched on the big week coming up, so I'll just say go Suns, Max.
Go Suns. If your name is Max36684, please feel free to review us. 5 stars. Thanks, everybody.